All right. Our next speaker, Norm Shealy, is well known for co-founding the American Board of Scientific Medical Intuition with Carolyn Myss, but has also spent his life dedicated to finding a solution for the common problem of chronic pain. Shortly after graduating from Duke Medical School and beginning his career as a neurosurgeon, Dr. Shealy noted the most common symptom in this world is pain, and yet nobody specializes in it. Now, Dr. Shealy's ideas have been the foundation for pain management therapies used all over the world. Please help me welcome to the stage Norm Shealy.
Thank you, Cardinal.
Yeah. Oh, here's your little clicker.
It's a pleasure to speak to people who are open and ready. And as you probably know, a majority of people are not. Did you know that only 3% of Americans, 3%, and there have been huge studies showing this, 3% have common sense enough? To me, common sense is knowing that you've got to take care of your body by not smoking, keeping your body mass index where it should be, eating, guess what, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day? You know what the average American does? 2.2. I don't know what the 0.2 is, probably an olive. And exercise 30 minutes 5 days a week. 3% of Americans have all of those. Now, just for grins, I always ask this at every time I speak. How many of you have the 4 basic habits? That's all? No smoking, body mass index 18 to 24, 5 servings of fruits and or vegetables a day, and 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week. How many? Slightly more than 3%. I've spoken at all kinds of meetings of people who come saying they're interested in health. If you don't start with those things, you don't have it. If you're Annie were a man and there's a place in southeast Colorado where you can have it done, don't leave yet. It isn't open until tomorrow. But if you're Annie were a man, that's how big the word if everybody in America just adopted those 4 habits, within 20 years, average life expectancy would go from 78 to 100. We lose 300 plus million people lose 22 years average because of not having those particular habits. Okay, if I could just... Well, there must be a change here somewhere. How do I get this thing to work?
Side button right there.
Okay. Okay, now I've got it. I think. Health is an inside job. And it's all attitude. And what is most essential of all is having a normal oxytocin system. Every known mental, emotional disorder is associated with low oxytocin. Now look at why we have oxytocin deficiency as a national illness. If the mother has a traumatic pregnancy, she does not produce oxytocin. If the mother is put to sleep for the delivery, she does not produce oxytocin. If the mother is induced into having the baby at a given time with artificial oxytocin, she doesn't produce oxytocin. Roughly 60 to 80% of babies born in this country today do not get an oxytocin grounding at birth. Even if the mother had adequate oxytocin right up through delivery. If in the first 7 years of life there's a major trauma, and what's the most common major trauma today? Divorce. Any major trauma. I would tell you, of 30,000 people I've worked with who are chronically depressed, a huge number of them will tell me they've never been happy or it all began in that first 7 years of life. That blocks the oxytocin system. It begins at conception. A happy pregnancy is essential. A happy normal birth is essential. Happy nurturing childhood. And it can be restored. Now, it can be restored by taking oxytocin. That's not producing it yourself. There have been numerous studies showing now that every known psychological emotional disorder can be helped by giving sprays of oxytocin in the nose. But it doesn't stay. They have to do it 4 times a day. It gets kind of expensive, but more importantly, doing that every day over a period of years is going to cause serious trouble to the nasal mucosa and probably atrophy, wasting, dryness, and bleeding even from the nose. So we need to find a way to restore the ability of each individual to make his or her oxytocin optimal, and we have. It is in every known emotional disease: autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, addiction, borderline inadequate personality, and schizophrenia. Every one of them can be helped, but it's temporary when you spray it in the nose. And there's been no long-term studies for obvious reasons. Back in the early part of the last century, George Zhukovsky published that human DNA frequency is 54 plus gigahertz, billions of cycles per second. He treated over 300 patients with his multi-wave oscillator at a university hospital in New York and claimed cures of everything, including cancer of various kinds. His book was translated in English in 1935. He moved here in 1939, and under mysterious circumstances was run down by a taxi or limousine in New York City in 1942, and the research stopped. Never has been resumed. Some people think the FDA was responsible, and I think they're capable of it. Human DNA frequency is now known to be 54 to 78 billion cycles per second at a billionth of a watt. The sun's strength on Earth is 1/10 billionth of a watt per centimeter square. So theoretically, if you could spend about 10 hours a day outside in the sun, you might get the natural stimulation of this human DNA frequency. And when you get illness, you don't decrease frequency, but you decrease the amplitude or the strength of these frequencies. Ukrainian physicists have applied this to acupuncture points. And when I visited there in 1993, they had treated 250,000 people and claimed cures. Now, they use the word cure as we might say improvement. For instance, they say rheumatoid arthritis is cured in 90% of people. Well, they're talking about getting rid of the symptoms for 6 to 24 months. In fact, I treated a woman who had had the treatment 2 years earlier, and her rheumatoid arthritis came back, and I was involved in her second round of treatment. So I came back, and although they call it microwave resonance therapy over there, I found that Americans were not interested in being microwaved. They thought it was being cooked or nuked or something, and so we called it giga because nobody knows what that means. Giga means billions of cycles. Tens are transcutaneous electroconductive stimulation. And eventually I was able to produce a small unit, about that big. And what I found was, unequivocally, we can do what the Ukrainians did with this device. But, as they had found in their own work, it takes about 20 minutes a day. I found most people, just as they won't eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, will not spend 20 minutes a day to save their life. We demonstrated unequivocally that specific points stimulated with these frequencies could raise DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone. That particular circuit, which I call the ring of fire, will cure 70% of people with rheumatoid arthritis who have failed conventional medicine. I don't see them before they fail conventional medicine, so I can't say it's 90% the way they claim. but many of theirs are virgin patients. 75% of people with migraine. 80% of people with diabetic neuropathy, for which there is no medical treatment. 70% of people with depression. 70% of people with low back pain. That's not bad for 20 minutes a day, but most people won't do it. And so as I worked through 5 different circuits that I discovered back in the 90s, and we demonstrated with each of them that we could do the specific thing. For instance, with air, my original work demonstrated that it would raise neurotensin. Neurotensin is a neuroleptic. Synchronicity is a fascinating thing to me because back in 1965, I did some of the original animal research on the first modern neuroleptic, ketamine. I don't do drug research, but this was looking at how it might affect pain, and it's been in use since the 60s. When we stimulated the ring of air, people would say things like, "It's got street value, doc," or "Is this legal?" And that's how you feel when you get neurotensin raised. Interestingly, 2 years ago, out of the blue, I suddenly knew that it would also raise oxytocin. And I found out of hundreds and hundreds of articles on neurotensin, one paper that said when neurotensin is activated, it also releases oxytocin. And so I just suddenly had this feeling, it's not just a neuroleptic, there's something else here. And so by the fall of that year, I had already demonstrated in volunteers that when we stimulated these points, we raised oxytocin. The problem is people weren't willing to spend 20 minutes a day to do it. So I began looking at what else can we do to stimulate these acupuncture points. And in my opinion, what I've discovered is the most important advance in acupuncture in 4,000 years. We can activate acupuncture points quite as well with the right combination of essential oils as we can with needles or electrical stimulation. It takes 30 seconds. Most people might spend 30 seconds to do something. So this is what we learned, and I decided when I finished the 5 circuits that if people would use fire, earth, and crystal, we ought to live 140 years. And that's when I wrote my book, Life Beyond 100. And I went around the country to 42 cities, talking about life beyond 100. And what I found was that Freud, the cocaine-addicted Freud, had one proper, correct thought. Most people have a death wish. He's not the only one who said that. Eric Berne published the book Games People Play. Eric Berne himself said that most people set their life script to die at a certain age of a given disease early in life. In other words, in the first 15 years of life, most people already have decided when they're going to die and of what they're going to die. I spoke at the International Transactional Analysis meeting one year, and it was confirmed by many of his colleagues that he told people that he had set his life script to die at age 60 of a heart attack. And he died at age 60 of a heart attack. I said, he was a brilliant man. Why didn't he change his life script? And one of the psychologists said, but Norm, what better way to prove his point? At any rate, as I have spoken, I've personally worked with over 30,000 people who are chronically depressed. And I can get 85% of them out of depression within 2 weeks without drugs. Incidentally, I started a petition last week. Ban antidepressants, not guns. Because antidepressants suck. They are second only to statin drugs in being dangerous. The risk of suicide is markedly increased in adults as well as teens who take antidepressant drugs. And there are 4 major scientific articles demonstrating, even one in the New England Journal of Medicine, stating that if the pharmacomafia had allowed all the negative outcome studies to be published, the net result would be zero. In my opinion, the net result is worse than zero, because not nearly as many people commit suicide or go on murderous rages unless they're put on those drugs. So antidepressant drugs are horrible and non-effective. I haven't ever seen a patient who really was normal on antidepressant drugs. Some people are sort of detached and sort of not living, but they're existing. They don't bitch and moan, they just are sort of like a chemical frontal lobotomy, that kind of thing. At any rate, so antidepressants are not the answer. The answer is oxytocin, of course. Now, in addition to fire, which raises DHEA and helps those fire illnesses that I mentioned, earth is another of the circuits that I worked with, and earth raises calcitonin. What's the most common cause of death in the elderly? A fractured hip. Calcitonin is the hormone that the thyroid gland produces that keeps your bones strong. So a huge majority of people have a deficiency of calcitonin throughout the latter half of their life. Calcitonin is also the strongest pain reliever the body produces, 40 to 60 times as powerful as morphine. That is not bad. And it doesn't have any negative effects. Unfortunately, the pharmacomafia, in its infinite lack of wisdom, created salmon calcitonin. They genetically modified salmon calcitonin. And although salmon calcitonin can help pain, just in the last few weeks, it has been demonstrated that long-term it creates cancer. Well, we're not salmon, just as Premarin. We're not horses. From the very beginning, I said, unless you weigh 800 or 1,200 pounds, you shouldn't be taking horse estrogen as Premarin. And even though it has been demonstrated to be dangerous, the use of Premarin has only decreased 50% since that was released years ago. So the pharmacomafia maintains its control over the world, and of course, the number one pharmacomafia evil company in the world is Monsanto. But that's another story. At any rate, calcitonin. For instance, recently, a man sent me an email. His wife had had surgery on her elbow, and she couldn't really use her arm at all 5 days later. So he put Earth Bliss, this mixture of oils, on the 13 points. Within 10 minutes, she could raise her hand over her head. That's how powerful calcitonin stimulation can be. And then crystal is interesting because the one thing that every illness has in common with every other one is free radicals. Free radicals are those things that rust our bodies. They destroy us. They lead to aging, illness, and death. And although there's good evidence for some help with antioxidants, there's not a single paper that shows that you can reduce free radical production more than 43%, and that one is difficult. With stimulation of the ring of crystal, we can reduce free radical production 80%. And we've now got studies showing people who do this 30 seconds a day maintain an 80% reduction average in their free radicals for at least 6+ months that we've already got data on. So when I finished my work, that's when I said, well, if people could keep their DHEA up, their calcitonin up, and their free radicals down, I ought to live 140 years. And that's when I found most people didn't want to live to be 100, let alone 140. I had to rethink my whole concept. Now, there are other ways of restoring DHEA than taking it. Taking it, it will never be physiologically normal, no matter what you do. See, in normal circumstances, DHEA is sort of dancing with cortisone. When we're stressed, which is the common denominator for people, we put out, among other things, not only adrenaline and noradrenaline, but cortisone. And when you put out cortisone, the adrenal gland says, oh, that's too high, puts out DHEA to bring it back down. There's a dance between cortisone and DHEA. Unless you were a jock in your teenage years, you produced your maximum production of DHEA by age 25. By age 30, most people have lost 10% of what they had at 25. By age 80, 100% of people virtually have less than 10% of what they had at age 30. So they're 90% below what they were at age 25. Taking it is risky, slightly. Now, nobody knows unequivocally which is worse, having a low DHEA or too much, because 39% of women who die in an automobile accident are found to have microscopic breast cancer. But if they live to be 100, only 11% of women, that's not good, but it's still only 11%, less than a third of those, will ever develop clinical breast cancer. 100% of men who live to be 100 will have microscopic evidence of prostate cancer. But only 13% of men ever develop active prostate cancer. If you take DHEA, there is an increased risk of developing breast cancer, prostate, ovarian, uterine cancer. It's not high, but it's definitely more than not taking. On the other hand, if you stimulate your body to make its own DHEA, nobody overproduces it. I've seen two people who had extremely high DHEA naturally. They were the healthiest two people I've ever seen, one woman and one man. Both of them normally reproduce it. And I've known them for 20 years now, and they're very healthy people. But there are other ways of restoring it. Applying gigatons, that 54 to 78 million cycles, to the ring of fire, these 12 points. Magnesium lotion. Magnesium deficiency is rampant in our society. 80% of you probably have low magnesium levels in your cells. Magnesium balances the electrical system of your body. When it's low, the electrical system's fragile. It shoots off too much. It could cause anxiety, depression, irregular heartbeat, and 350 other problems. Magnesium deficiency is not easily corrected orally because magnesium is the only nutrient that I know that is absorbed in the distal colon. So if you have a gut transit time of less than 12 hours, you don't absorb it. It gets out too quickly. If you eat fat, a high-protein diet, or a lot of calcium, that blocks the absorption of magnesium. Our soil is deficient in magnesium. In fact, the only soil in the world that's known to have normal magnesium is Egypt. I don't know why, but they still do, but they don't raise much food. Through the skin, within 1 month, you can restore your intracellular magnesium level, and it raises DHEA. Taking it orally and giving it even intravenously does not raise DHEA. I have thousands and thousands of people with whom I've worked with magnesium deficiency. Natural progesterone cream. Women at menopause lose the ability to make progesterone adequately. Men throughout life make more progesterone than women do after menopause. On the other hand, men don't need as much as women do. And so, in my first intuitive hit at how else can I raise DHEA, I thought about progesterone. So I gave it to 7 men, my first study. And lo and behold, their DHEA went up and they became horny and everybody was happy except one wife. And when I published this eventually, and I did it in Women, of course, later, a professor of endocrinology from France wrote and said, there's no pathway to convert progesterone to DHEA. To which I responded, it's a good thing my patients don't know this because they can do it. But men need about half what women do. Vitamin C does not raise DHEA, and methylsulfonomethane, or MSM, does not raise DHEA. But the two together, again, a synchronistic happening when I got interested in methylsulfonomethane because we tend to be deficient in organic sulfur. And I gave it to 10. My first study, it's usually 10, and it was in this case. Half of them raised their DHEA, and the other half didn't. So there's got to be another factor. It turns out that the half of the people who had their DHEA go up in a month were already taking vitamin C, and the ones who did not were not. So neither one of them alone will do it. Now, a little bit of molybdenum and a little bit of beta-1,3-glucan together will help. That's your optimal. Each one of these things, on average, by itself, will raise your DHEA levels 60% from where you start. And so when you put them together, they raise DHEA an average of 250%. That begins to be clinically useful. Because I'm talking about men who have first of all, I'll talk about my 30,000 patients. I've only probably done the measurements in 5,000 of DHEA. 100% of my patients are low or deficient in DHEA, 100%. Half of the patients are below the so-called lower limit of normal. In a man, the lower limit of normal is 180 to 1,200. Now, there's no other physiological system that has that kind of variation. That's ridiculous. So half of those people they say are normal are not. They are deficient or low. In women, it's 130 to 980 nanograms per deciliter. Again, half of my patients are below the 750 and above in men or the 550 or above in women. And so I've never seen a patient with any illness who had a healthy level of DHEA. And of course, then in the last year or so, I've demonstrated that this blend of oils that I put together as Fire Bliss will raise DHEA just as nicely as stimulating electrically, and it takes only 30 seconds to put it on. One woman, and of course this is not necessarily a controlled study, because one woman applied it to her husband, and she actually measured his testosterone before and after, and it doubled. But having his wife do it might have had something to do with it. So the Ring of Air, which is my favorite because it's so widely needed, raises neurotensin, which is a neuroleptic, which is also anti-nociceptive or anti-pain. All autistic children are low in oxytocin. So in autism, the Ring of Air plus the Ring of Earth will help virtually 100% of them. Last September, I met a 12-year-old autistic kid who's brought to me by his family. He would hardly stay in the room with me. He was that withdrawn, if I couldn't touch him. I had him apply the oils. 2 months later, I was at an expo, and he came up and hugged me. That's the kind of results I'm seeing in autism. 3 adult children of friends of mine who have Asperger's syndrome, which is just adult autism, all 3 of them are doing well. One woman wrote me, she has to be somewhere in her 80s, I presume. My 60-year-old son has been obnoxiously depressed all of his life. Using Air Bliss twice a day, he is now a delight to be around. A veteran with 10 years of post-traumatic stress disorder. The first night he used this, slept without a nightmare. He's 8 months now. I hear from him almost every week. His post-traumatic stress syndrome has been totally obliterated by using this. Tinnitus, ringing in the ears, can be helped with a combination of air and fire. So, what it does is really oxytocin, the nurturing, bonding, happiness hormone. Interestingly, I was working with an editor of my next book, and one day, I almost hung up on her. She, I'm having terrible menopausal symptoms. I said, shut up. You've got a bottle of Air Bliss, try it. The next day, she was normal. So I said, first 10 women who will try this for their menopausal symptoms, I'll give you a bottle to find out what happens. Response, all of them. One woman actually stopped her bioidentical hormones and was still fine. So we're getting phenomenal results in menopausal symptoms as well with the oil. The ring of air consists of 13 specific points. Some of these are bilateral. Spleen 1A, liver 3, I'll show you these in a moment, stomach 36, lung 1, gallbladder 20, and governing vessels 1, 16, and 20. These are the points that activate the ring of air. And if we have time, I want to lead you through at least a massage of these points, because you can activate them with tapping and massage and visualization. It's not quite as strong as it is with the oils or the gigotins, but it's adequate. Some people feel very spaced out just massaging it. So you can always start with trying that with any of these circuits. Well, the points start down on the foot at the tip of the inside of your big toenail. Now, if there are acupuncturists in the room, you know that spleen 1 is at the base of the big toe. This is the tip of the toenail. These things come to me from a guide. And so he comes in and he says, Norman, I have another ring for you. And this one you will say is for simultaneity of thought, holographic thinking. And that's what you call it. That's why it was on the previous slide, because those are instructions from him. And he said the first point is at the tip of the inside of the big toenail. Well, having done acupuncture since 1967, I put my finger on the base of the big toenail, because that's where spleen 1 is. And my guy said, but I said the tip. And I said, G, I call him G for God. There is no point at the tip of the big toenail. He said, there is now. And you will call it spleen 1A for one Aquarian. You don't argue when you get stuff like this. At any rate, that's the first point. The second point is liver 3, which is on the foot between the big toe and the second toe. On the foot, not out between the toes themselves. The next point is up the outside of the calf as high as you can go outside the shin bone, and you run into the bone of the knee, and that's stomach 36, which is the second strongest energetic point in the human body. The strongest is Hoku, large intestine 4, which is here, but we don't have that in any of the rings for some reason. The next point is at the base of the spine. It's your spine. You could massage it anytime you like. Okay, in public, through your clothes. And the next point, so the energy comes up the spine to the very top, but it also splits as it goes through the chest, and it comes out at lung 1, which is under your collarbone, out as far as you can go. Put your finger up there and press on it. If you're touching the humerus, but also you're under the collarbone. It's really high. And if it's not tender, you're not alive. That one point is tender in everybody I've ever tested it in. I guess we don't breathe well. At any rate, the governing vessel 16 is at the base of the skull, and then gallbladder 20 is halfway across the base of the skull, also another very strong point. And then the final point is the top center of the head above the ears. And I think we're going to have plenty of time. Let's do it right now, so you can be blissed out for the rest of the talk. So, I can't quite show this very well on myself, and besides, I could get too spacey if I do it too much to myself. But take off your shoes. You don't have to take off your socks. And if you can't do your legs like this, you can raise one at a time. And so you could reach down, and it's in the meat of the big toe, but at the very tip of the toenail. So both sides. So massage vigorously, and then tap. That's all it takes. Now do the other one. The other, spleen 1A. I can feel it through my shoe. Now you want to do liver 3. So put your finger on the top of the foot, back about a centimeter from the web, between the big toe and the next toe. Liver 3, strongest liver point in the body. Liver 3. Now come up the outside of your shin bone. And if you could do this, you could do both of these at the same time. Otherwise, one at a time. Stomach 36. Now, I strongly suggest that you stand up for this one, because you're going to do the very bottom. It's hard to do in a chair. So you're going to knuckle the very bottom of your spine, right in the center. Governing vessel 1. Woo-hoo! This, folks, is Kundalini rising. That is why this circuit is so important. Now you can sit back down. You don't want the Kundalini to get too far away ahead of you. Put your hand, now this one is best done one at a time. Run it under the collarbone and out right to the head of the humerus, but still under the collarbone. And vigorously massage and tap. And then the other one. Woohoo! Now, take your fingers and run it down the very base of your skull, right across halfway. Halfway across, there's a little indentation or opening between the tendons. And then the very top center of your skull, governing vessel 20. I assure you it is not hollow. I had a brain scan to be sure. Okay. Now, close your eyes. Take a deep breath and let it go. And imagine that you are breathing in and out through the spleen 1A point at the tips on the inside of your big toenails. And you're breathing in right into the center of the big toe and back out. Take several breaths through the spleen 1A point, in and out, in and out. It's a very pleasant thing to do. Now move over on the top of your foot between the big toe and the next toe, liver 3, and imagine you're breathing in and out right into the center of your foot and out again. And take 3 breaths in and out through the liver 3 points. Move up the outside of your shin bone, just below the knee itself. And in stomach 36, take 3 breaths in and out, coming right into the center of your calves and out again. Now turn your attention to the tailbone. Imagine you're breathing in through the spine, at the very tip of your spine at the bottom, and the air comes all the way up your spine and out at the top, just below your skull. Next time, breathe in at the top of your spine, down the spinal column, and out of the tailbone. Breathe in at the tailbone, out at the top of the spine, just below the skull. Breathe in at the top, out at the bottom of your spine. And one more time, breathe in at the tailbone, all the way up and out at the top of the spine, in at the top and out at the bottom of your spine. Then move your attention up onto the front outer part of your chest, just below the collarbone. Now you're breathing in and filling your lungs directly through the lung 1 points. and out again. Breathe in, fill your lungs through lung 1, and out again. Breathe in, fill your lungs, and out again. Now move your attention halfway across the base of your skull on either side, gallbladder 20, and there you're breathing in, and the air comes all the way under the base of the brain and back out again. In through the gallbladder 20, all the way under the base of the brain and out again. In through the gallbladder 20, halfway across the base of the skull, all the way under the brain and out again. And finally, breathe in at the top center of your head, above your ears, governing vessel 20. The air comes in and goes all the way through your brain and spine and out of the tailbone. In at the tip of your tailbone, up the spine and through the brain, out at the top. In at the center, top of your head above your ears, all the way down through the brain and spine and out the tailbone. In at the tailbone, all the way up the spine and brain, out the top. And one more time. In at the top center of your head above your ears, down through the brain and spine and out of the tailbone. In at the tailbone, back up through the spine and brain and out of the top. Now, and you can do this. You know where all these 13 points are. Imagine breathing in and out through all 13 points at the same time, so that essentially your entire body is being aerated perfectly. Every cell within your body is getting an optimal amount of air right through these 13 points into the center of the body and out again. In all 13 points to the center of the body and back out again. And pause for a moment and just observe how you feel mentally, physically, emotionally. And stay in that state of consciousness for a few moments, feeling bliss. And without moving your eyes to either side, just looking straight ahead, but not at anything, open your eyes and see whether you can maintain that state of detachment. And if you lose it, close your eyes and go back and forth a few times, because ultimately what you'd like to do is to be able, with 1 or 2 breaths, to go into that state of total detachment, feeling at peace and blissful. And open your eyes. Now, this is important. Does anyone feel nervous or agitated from being so detached? Because I've had that happen. And if you do, I would like to show you how to ground yourself again. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sarah. Okay. So what are you feeling? I'm coming close so they can hear you.
When I was breathing up through my tailbone to my head, I got some shakes.
Right. That's Kundalini. That's what happens sometimes with Kundalini rising. That's okay. Go ahead.
And the same, it happened again, just 1 or 2 more.
Okay. How you feel right now?
Well, I felt pretty bad when I came. I had a terrible night's sleep, and so I feel a little bit better, but I still don't, I feel kind of agitated. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. No, come. Have a seat here. It's safe. I've sat there.
Okay.
Take off your sandals and sit back.
Now I'm really nervous. All right.
Oh, no. The grounding point is kidney 1. Kidney 1 is the only acupuncture point on the sole of the foot. So can you bring a foot up? Great. Right there. Press hard. Get anyone. Doop, 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 doop. Bubbling spring. That's the translation of the meaning of that point. Good. Now the other one. Good. Now how do you feel? It's okay. You don't have to agree with me.
Still about the same.
Okay, then go here. This point balances your parasympathetic system, and this one your sympathetic system. So I'm going to do this for you. What we're really trying to do is sometimes when you're not accustomed to doing this, it just puts you sort of spaced out, which may or may not feel good. Sometimes it feels good, and sometimes it feels awful to be in that space. The other one, please. Relax. Now, how do you feel? Okay. Still speaking to me?
Yeah.
Okay. You all right? Feel good enough to go back in? Okay. She wants to get away at this point. I'm teasing. Thank you. The first time I did this exercise, just the way we just did it, more or less, Carolyn Mason and I were doing a workshop with a group of 30 people, and a young man from England, James, stood up afterwards, and he's sort of like this. Are you okay, James? I'm just fine. It took him 6 hours to come back to earth. I haven't had anybody that bad since then, or that good as the case may be. But anyway, it's a powerful circuit, and it does raise oxytocin. And oxytocin, if you are a normal, healthy person, one of the roughly 20% of people, if I hug you, or somebody you like hugs you, or even shakes your hand, you'll get a little burst of oxytocin. If you pet an animal, you'll get a little burst. It's the normal reaction to feeling good in relationships. If you don't have oxytocin, you don't feel anything. You just sort of, no change. So it's an extremely important, this is the bliss, the ultimate bliss hormone. So it's a neuroleptic, it helps you detach, it leads to simultaneity of thought, which is intuition. It's especially good with bliss, air bliss, and oxytocin, the nurturing, bonding hormone. So, detachment from the unchangeable. You know, it's hard to be detached if there's something bugging you that you can change. There are a lot of things that you can't change, many. And so, if you can't change it, why destroy yourself with being upset over it? Not even judging it, because if you're judging it, you're still in a negative phrase. No need to know why. You know, stuff happens. And being at peace. So music and nature and exercise and sex, if you enjoy it. Many years ago, I did a study on 4 couples who agreed to let me come out to their home and draw blood, go away for 45 minutes and come back after they had had either sexual intercourse, private masturbation, or mutual masturbation. All of them raised oxytocin, except in one of the men, who was Catholic to the nth degree, and despite the fact that he had agreed to this, masturbating alone, he got no response at all. Don't bother if you don't enjoy it. And then, of course, you know, no need to have sex because you don't get any benefit out of it if you don't enjoy it. Okay. And dark chocolate, of course, has another chemical in it called anandamide. And ananda means bliss. Bliss, amide, a little piece of protein. So you can activate it with gigatens, 54 to 78 billion cycles per second, air bliss, massage, tapping, visualization. And it's worth doing. And then, of course, we go to the next one, which I think, in a sense, is the second most important because it has so many other benefits that you don't get with just oxytocin. And this is the circuit for the entire endocrine system. When the guy, I sat down after my progesterone experiences, and I'd gotten an increase, an average of 60%, but if you start off at 180, even if it goes up 100%, you're only at 360. You're still not halfway towards healthy level for a man. And so I said one day, what else can I do to activate DHEA? And my guide says, Norman, if you would stimulate the points that connect the kidneys with the gonads, with the adrenal glands, with the thyroid and the pituitary through a one-to-the-sky point, it will raise DHEA. And I said, but gee, there's no point for the pituitary. Chinese didn't know it. He said, find one. So I got out my acupuncture atlas, and I picked out the points to do. Now, fortunately, I knew that he knew enough about acupuncture, more than I do, I'm sure, because your inherited genetic chi, life energy, is stored in the kidney. So that's why the kidneys would be involved in this particular circuit. And I picked out governing vessel 20 because it overlies the pineal, which ultimately controls the pituitary. And so I tried it, and indeed, stimulating these particularly, it's only 12 points in this circuit, raised DHEA, an average of 60%. And I've got hundreds and hundreds of people where we've done this and proven that it works. And that's when I did the experiments with migraine headache, diabetic neuropathy, rheumatoid arthritis, back pain, and depression. It's not quite as good air bliss for depression. It's only 70% instead of 90%. Not bad. There ain't a drug in the world that's 70% effective practically for anything. So these are the points of the Ring of Fire. Kidney 3, bilaterally. Bladder 22, bilaterally. That is the control system for bladder 22 for the sympathetic, that's your excitable stress response, nervous system of the entire lower body. Conception vessels 2, 6, and 18. Master of the heart 6, which is the control center for the sympathetic nervous system for the whole body. Large intestine 18, I call it the Frankenstein points. If you've ever seen this Frankenstein movie, you know, it has those little electrodes coming right out of these 2 points, right? Just barely below the mastoids, between the front and back muscles of the neck. That's the window of the sky points that I chose for this one. And then governing vessel 20. Stimulating these points helps fire illnesses, whether it's low or high. For instance, migraine is an imbalance of fire energy. Depression is a deficiency of fire energy. Diabetic neuropathy, damage to the nerves from the diabetes, is a loss of fire energy, etc. So it is highly effective. Now, we don't have time to go through all of these circuits, but anybody who wants my slides, you're welcome to them. I'll be happy to send them to you if you'll just give me your email address, printed so my secretary can translate it. And if you'd like my free email newsletter that comes out every week, let me know and I'll put you on that. At any rate, these are the points for the Ring of Fire. And this is your pubic bone, the one, right there. It has nothing to do, with stimulating the genitals. It's the bone. And you can do it in private if you like. At any rate, whatever. Bladder 22, if you put your finger in the middle of your belly button and come around to the spine and an inch to either side, but directly opposite the belly button, that's bladder 22. Etc. Master of the Heart 6. And then this one doesn't show up very well here. Actually, there is a black point here. Conception vessel 6, conception vessel 18, large intestine 18, Master of the Heart 6, and the one at the very top. And again, people could sometimes get very good results just with massaging and tapping. And the visualization for this one, let's just do the visualization for this one because it's really fun. This is the only one where the guide gave me the visualization. He tells me to create it otherwise. So close your eyes for a moment and imagine down on the inside, behind your ankle bones, you have 2 sacred altars. And on those sacred altars are burning brilliant red fires. Into the red flames, throw all of your issues related to your family. And the fire grows ever brighter and higher. And move your attention up to the top center of your pubic bone and just below your belly button on the front of your abdomen. And there you have 2 more sacred altars. And there are burning orange fires. And the orange flames throw all of your issues related to sex, security, and finances. And the orange flames grow ever brighter. And the energy moves back through your abdomen and comes out 1 inch to either side of your spine, but opposite the belly button on the back. And there you have 2 sacred altars with brilliant yellow flames. And the yellow fires throw all of your issues related to yourself, self-esteem, and responsibility, resentment of being forced to take more responsibility or someone else not taking adequate responsibility. And the yellow flames grow ever brighter. And the energy moves up and out the top center of your chest, about 2 inches below the very top of your breastbone. And there you have a sacred altar with brilliant emerald green flames. And the emerald fires throw all of your issues related to judgment and love. And the emerald fires grow ever brighter. And the energy moves up and down and out the front, just above your wrists, and up the sides of your neck, just below your mastoids, but on the sides. And you have 4 sacred altars with brilliant, deep blue sapphire fires. And the blue fires throw all of your issues related to communication and will. Things you wish you had said but didn't, or wish you had not said that you did. All of those issues of personal desires. And the blue flames grow ever brighter. And as it moves right up to the bottom of your brain and up through the brain and out the top center above your ears. And there you have a sacred altar with violet flames. And the violet flames throw every other issue related to everything. Why? Why not? Purpose, meaning, life itself. And just spend a moment being aware of these 13 sacred altars, this brilliant rainbow of energy that is you. And be aware that this is one way to energize yourself, to clear and burn the dross, the debris, the nonsense that you don't need, just by intending and imaging. And with that knowledge, take a deep breath and open your eyes. And notice the difference in feeling as you do these different circuits in your own body. It's quite a different feeling, physically and emotionally and mentally. I do this sometimes when I can get it, when I have a computer here, because I play the Ring of Fire then, because it's a wonderful thing. So it raises DHEA 60 to 100%. It improves 70 to, 80% of patients with migraine, diabetic neuropathy, rheumatoid arthritis, depression. And then, of course, fire bliss oil raises DHEA. Beta endorphin, of course, is also one of the positive emotions, the feel-good narcotic. And things that will raise that are laughter and sex and physical exercise. We've done all kinds of experiments as to what each of these can be optimally done. Just doing this for 20 minutes will raise your beta endorphin. It doesn't have to be vigorous exercise. Certainly, jogging and things might do a better job. There's an electrical stimulator called the LISS, L-I-S-S. Saul Liss was an engineer who brought it to me in 1975, and he thought it was primarily for pain control in the body, and I wasn't impressed. At any rate, he brought me a stronger one that I could feel, and then I was willing to work with it. And so I found that if you put it here or here, it will phenomenally increase serotonin, which is the basic, normal, healthy, feel-good thing, and beta endorphin, which is even stronger but not as much of it. And the LISS transcranially is the single strongest thing that I know quickly to get people out of depression. Some evidence of diphenylalanine. Deep sleep, of course, is the normal mechanism. And vibratory music, music which you feel, not just hear. Hearing's good, but when you feel it, it raises beta endorphin. And it has powerful, powerful mood modulating benefits. So there are a whole bunch of positive mood chemicals. Anandamide is the one that is in dark chocolate, not milk chocolate, by the way. Oxytocin, dopamine. The problem with dopamine is it can take you too far. People can get sort of out of control with excess dopamine. Phenylethylamine, beta endorphin, and then fats. You have to, one of the greatest errors in modern medicine is this preoccupation with cholesterol. I wouldn't take a statin drug for $1 trillion. I used to say billion, but that no longer has any meaning. We are on the verge of an epidemic of Alzheimer's because of statin drugs, among other things. I see people all the time. Well, they tell me it's not Alzheimer's. Well, are you on a statin drug? Yep. Well, if you don't mind killing your brain, your liver, your pancreas, kidneys, and and your muscles, including your heart muscle, then stay on your statin drug. At any rate, fat is essential. You can't have a brain or a nervous system without fat. Your immune system is dependent upon fat. It is what you use to make a lot of positive feeling things. These are the things that raise oxytocin. Again, the stimulation with the GQ10s. Bliss oil on the ring of air. Sex, massage, kissing, touch of a friend, hugs, petting an animal, music. Anything that makes you feel good if you have a normal system. If your system is not adequately activated, however, you've got to stimulate it to work again so that you can enjoy those things. Now, I mentioned Kundalini here again because I think it's important. Kundalini is the psycho-spiritual energy of consciousness, which is thought to reside within the sleeping body at the base of the spine. It is aroused through spiritual discipline or spontaneously to bring about new states of consciousness, including mystical illumination. About 15 years ago, I had a 6-month Kundalini experience. It was interesting. I had the most powerful, unusual dreams I've ever had. And I had times when I couldn't stay awake. And I don't drink coffee ordinarily, but I could drink 6 cups of coffee to try to stay awake. And other periods when I couldn't go to sleep. But it was fun. It was an interesting experience, and thank heavens it didn't last more than 6 months, however. But it is what is activated to some extent when you stimulate the ring of air. Deficient in every known emotional disorder. Essential. Again, all of these things we're just repeating. Now, this is not me. This is quotes from the literature. I've got hundreds of articles on oxytocin. The quantity and quality of maternal care received during infancy determines adult social competence, ability to cope with stress, aggressiveness, and even the preference for addictive substances. Neurochemical systems, especially of oxytocin and vasopressin, which is related somewhat, are strongly influenced by parental nurturing during infancy. Neglect and abuse during early life may cause bonding systems to develop abnormally and compromise the capacity for rewarding interpersonal relationships, a commitment to societal and cultural values later in life. In other words, it's essential for normal behavior, for feeling, not only for feeling happy, but for just functioning in society. Personality and mood are perhaps more multidimensional than anything we perceive. They are conditioned by our genetics and perhaps most of all by our environment from the time of conception, at least until adulthood. It also appears that the emotional environment during gestation may be more critical than almost all other factors except the moment of birth. If the mother had a traumatic environment during pregnancy, if she was induced at labor, anesthetized at the time of delivery, she fails to produce the oxytocin boost that initiates Earth life for the baby. And then there's the ring of crystal, which is also a critical one for reducing free radicals. And these are the points. Spleen 4, conception vessel 8.5, governing vessel 4.5, conception vessel 14.5, governing vessel 7.5, governing vessel 14.5, conception vessel 23, gallbladder 30.5, gallbladder 11, and governing vessel 20. These are the points which regulate the overall energetic system and, quote, assist in regeneration. Here's why that's so important. Every cell in your body dies within a maximum of 7 years. Every cell, even your brain bucket cells. If they were reborn into a low level of free radicals, when they are regenerated, they would be like newborn cells. But most people have an excess of free radicals, these destructive chemicals. They are the result of damage to cell walls. The cell wall is made up of a fat molecule of some kind, and when it's killed, it comes out in the urine as malone dialdehyde. It's a breakdown product of cell wall fat. Most people that I have tested, and only a few thousand, are running a 3+ to 5+ free radical all the time. I've only seen 2 or 3 people who had low levels of free radicals without doing something to encourage that. It decreases free radical production 80% within 3 days. It can be stimulated with these gigafrequencies, but Crystal Bliss lowers free radicals 80%, and it takes only 30 seconds. And we've got over 6 months now, the best free radical reduction known. And so I'll go through quickly the points, and we'll perhaps have time to do the guided imagery at least. The first one is spleen 4, which is on the inside of your foot at the long bone end, coming down from frozen. Okay, let's try again. There it is. Spleen 4. Gallbladder 30.5 is opposite the bottom of your buttocks on the sides, on the halfway around the front, right on the center of the femur. And then these 3 points on the back, which are governing vessel points, opposite 3 points on the front. And then a point right here as where the ears come into the front of your skull. And of course, they all end right up here at this one. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine that on the inside of your foot there, where the spleen 4 point is, you have 2 ruby crystals lighted from within. And the red light comes all the way through the insides of your feet and meets in the center, but also goes out the sides of your feet. And move your attention up on the very center of the sides of your thighs, opposite the bottom of your buttocks. And there you have 2 red rubies lighted from within. And the light comes all the way through your thighs and meets in the middle and goes out the sides into space. Move your attention just above your belly button and directly behind of the center of the spine. And there you have 2 orange citron crystals lighted from within. And it goes all the way through your belly and out the front and the back. Move your attention to the very bottom center of your chest and directly behind it over the spine. And there you have 2 emerald crystals lighted from within. And the light goes all the way through your chest and out the front and out the back. Move your attention up to the top of your Adam's or Eve's apple, just above your larynx. And there, and directly behind it over the center of the spine, you have 2 deep blue sapphire crystals lighted from within. And the light shines all the way through your neck and out the front and out the back. Move your attention up where the front of your ears comes into your scalp. And there you have 2 blue-purple indigo sapphires lighted from within. And the light goes all the way through your brain and out the sides into space. And move your attention up to the very top center of your head, above your ears, and there you have a beautiful amethyst crystal lighted from within. And the violet light goes straight up into the sky, but also down through your brain and spine and out the bottom of your spine. This is your ring of crystal. And open your eyes. And then there's the ring of earth. Kidney 1, which is the one on the bottom of your foot, the only one up there, sort of between the ball of the toe and the next toe. Bladder 54, which is behind the center of your knee, and bladder 60 outside the ankle bone. Large intestine 16, which is behind your collarbone as far as you can go. Stomach 9, which is here. By the way, you don't tap or massage stomach 9. You pinch, because you're right over the carotid artery and the carotid sinus. You could faint or cause a stroke if you press in there. And then small intestine 17, which is on the front of the sternocleidomastoid below the angle of the jaw on both sides. And again, be careful there. You can pinch the muscle, but don't go inside. And, of course, governing vessel 20. And this is for calcitonin and helping in that way. So it increases calcitonin over 40%. It's 40 to 60 times as powerful as morphine. Can be stimulated with 54 to 78 gigahertz, but also with earth bliss. And these are the points. We don't have time to go through them. Big 3, in my opinion, for life in general is DHEA, fire, calcitonin, earth, free radicals, crystal. But for a huge majority of people, more important than longevity is happiness while you're here, and that would be air. The ring of water normalizes aldosterone, which is very important in balancing emotion for edema or swelling, weight loss when done with the ring of fire, and contacting the Christological heart, and best done with water bliss. And I don't think we have time to go through all of these, but if you get the slide, you can have them. And the implications are that peak DHEA levels at age 25. By age 80, it's less than 10% of what it was at age 25. The rings of fire, earth, and crystal have the longevity potential These optimally, I believe, if you had other good health habits as well, should increase life to 140 years, average, plus or minus 20 for genetics and accidents. Self-esteem, nutritional factors, social circumstances, environmental conditions are all part of it. It is largely established by birth and essentially not later than age 7. Very few people who have a poor self-esteem at age 7 will ever succeed well in life thereafter. A wonderful book many, many years ago, back in the 70s, by Alice Steadman called Who's the Matter, Me? And one of the other best books is Permanent Healing by Daniel Condren and Heal Your Body A to Z by Louise Hay. Average life has decreased 22 years because of smoking, obesity, poor nutrition, lack of exercise. These 4 habits could increase life 22 years. Optimal ones of these could add 40 years of life. That's the cover of my book. Conscientiousness. This takes us to the power of conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is the number one determinant of health and longevity. A minimum of 75% of how long you're going to live is not genetics. 75% is conscientiousness and how healthy you're going to be getting there. Basically, the central mechanism of a conscientious person is being organized, responsible, orderly, self-disciplined. There are other related words, synonyms. But this is the crux of conscientiousness. It's a small percentage of people today. We have probably, from my opinion of watching society, less conscientious people now than we had 60 years ago. 1,500 children were followed for 80 years, the longest study of human personality known. The most conscientious live considerably longer than the less. Far more important, the diet, exercise, church, and everything else. Genes, of course, do represent some of it. And that some of it is reflected in your telomeres, the tips of your DNA. And so when I got interested in this a number of years ago, I began measuring telomeres. The best lab that I know to this date is in Canada, in Vancouver, Repeat Diagnostics. Don't waste your money measuring your telomeres at any of the other companies. There are 2 or 3 others. I've tested them all. Don't go there. It's a waste of money and blood. So we set out with the idea that if we could expose the body to this human DNA frequency, 54 to 78, at a billionth of a watt per centimeter square, so the whole body is being exposed to it, that it would raise the telomere or rejuvenate the telomeres. Average telomere loss is 1% per year of life. We're genetically conditioned to live to be 100 if we have good health habits. If we don't have good health habits, it can run out at 40 or in the 60s or any old time. And what we found is that 70% of the people who will use this exposure, it takes 30 minutes a day. No matter how you do it, it takes 30 minutes, and so we can't get everybody to do it. I don't know. Just in the last few weeks, I have decided to take the people who are not doing it, who've entered the research project 6 years ago, and if they will continue to measure their telomeres, we're going to give them the oils of fire, earth, and crystal to use every day. Take a minute and a half of time to do it and follow their telomeres now to see if we can continue doing it just by putting on these oils onto those 3 circuits instead of having to expose the whole body. Conscientiousness involves not just living. I don't care how long I live. It's absolutely unimportant. How happy and healthy I am while I'm here is my only interest. And therefore, I do the things that I recommend for others to do. And I think we have 5 minutes for questions. So if you have a question, I think there's a microphone here they would like you to use, and I'm happy to.
Thank you so much. So the question relates to the issue of purpose and sovereignty. You spoke about detachment, and I'm just wondering the type of unbridled enthusiasm and curiosity and aliveness and purpose that you have. Where do you keep that? Where does that come from? And for those of us that a lot of this might feel very overwhelming, especially when you start to hear about the pharma mafia, as you brought up, and other realities of the social matrix. How would you suggest people to liberate themselves and be with that as they're working it out, as we're birthing a new culture and hospicing a dying culture?
I understand perfect what she's saying. I often have said I did not have the courage to choose abusive parents. I was blessed from birth and before by parents, both of whom were almost over-nurturing. It can be a little problem sometimes when you're younger, but I've never regretted it. If you didn't get that, if you don't have that, and I have had that with my parents and my marriage and my children, I was told by my guide many years ago that people choose where they will have their crises. They choose it in the body, relationships, finances, or career. You have chosen it in your body. I've had major accidents. In 1995, someone whom I had murdered 300 years ago came back to get even. He jerked my spine, dislocated my spine. I was paralyzed. I knew when it happened, this was karmic. I have a few problems with coordination now, but I still exercise 75 to 90 minutes every day. Can't play racquetball anymore because I'm too clumsy. I don't dwell on that. I chose it to have it in my body. I'd rather have it in my body, those other three areas. So if one doesn't have that feeling, then the only thing I know is to really, I would primarily concentrate on the ring of air. Because if you can get your oxytocin system functioning naturally so that when you believe and like and enjoy, your oxytocin system is already there to help you. So it's oxytocin deficiency that I think deprives a huge number of people from not having that conscientiousness that makes you enthusiastic about life. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. My question is, how do you figure out which of the rings needs to be stimulated? And then you were talking about your oils. Does that mean just applying a little bit of the oils on the points that you were talking about?
Yeah, it comes in a little roll-on bottle.
Uh-huh.
It's not much bigger than a chapstick. And you press it into the point, hard, enough to be slightly uncomfortable, but not painful, and twist it both sides twice and move on to the next one. It takes 1 or 2 seconds per point. So you start at the bottom and move up to the top, because that's what I was taught to do in acupuncture. Whenever you're doing a circuit, you always start at the bottom and move up. And so I believe that if you just want to be healthy and you don't have a problem with depression or lack of self-esteem and happiness, then I would use fire, earth, and crystal. If you have a problem with what I call happiness and joy and that sort of thing, I would just use air until I feel absolutely ecstatically good, and then I might do the others. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, folks, we're out of time. Thank you very much. I'll be out at the table.